Many thanks to PPA for sponsoring this week's video. So welcome to yet another video dedicated to improving one's landscape photography, but this video is a bit different as it focuses on 9 quick tips for creating horrible landscape photos. So sort of a step-by-step guide for destroying one's outdoor photography skill set. Now these 9 steps are in a very specific order as they occur during the on-location process. So a bit of a fun video this week that I hope you'll enjoy as much as I enjoyed making it. But I do want to add a very quick disclaimer here that the actions in this video should not be attempted nor replicated at home. So I've come out to this kind of local area. It's a lake, or I guess tarn, depending on what part of the country you happen to be in. It's an otherwise pretty boring scene. I think it's something that's very typical that a lot of us see in our local areas. It's one of the reasons why shooting local is so difficult, because we see everything in a very boring fashion. And I think it's a great challenge to find something that is very boring and try and make something very unique. And that's my challenge today to myself, to see if I can make something interesting in this area that I pass constantly on my day-to-day basis. But something that I think is kind of like a quick tip. It has to do with the time of day to shoot, and it's something that I call bright light. So if you think about it, and I think this is a big misconception in outdoor photography, studios today spend thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on lights, with one job, just to make the studio as bright as possible. And it's the same thing with outdoor photography. You need as much light as you possibly can. So this idea that you want to shoot in the early morning, golden hour, sunrise, sunset, blue hours, it's a farce. It's not the best time of day to shoot. And yeah, maybe you get that nice side light, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to crank up your ISO. You might have to dial it, or double it from 100 to 200. It's going to completely ruin your photograph because you're shooting in such dim conditions. The best scenario, in all honesty, just to be frank with you, is to shoot at high noon on a completely cloudless day. You get as much light as you possibly can on your subject. That way you don't have to drag out your shutter. You don't have to increase your ISO. It's going to make the world of difference in your photography. Now, these conditions here today, these are not the best conditions. It's overcast, it's kind of dim. So I'm not 100% certain how great this image is going to turn out. But ideally, you want to shoot in the brightest time of the day, and that's really going to help you out. So I'm just kind of walking around the edge of this lake area. There's some nice, interesting stumps over there. I shouldn't say interesting. It's something that's more unique than just blank water. But I want to come over here and just kind of look around this area right now. And something that I think it will definitely help you out. Now, if you've been into outdoor photography for any amount of time, you will have heard people talking about foreground, midground, background, just constantly all the time. And with the big idea of being that you can create a 3-dimensional photograph, it creates depth. Well, the funny thing about that is I've been on workshops where people are in front of these incredible waterfalls, and they're not even looking at the waterfall. They're staring down at the ground, looking for some kind of foreground interest to use to anchor the photograph for this waterfall, which is completely bananas. And they spend the entire time looking down at the ground to create this illusion of depth. Well, in all honesty, no matter what you do, you are not going to be able to create a 2-dimensional object. I should say, you're not going to be able to turn in a 2-dimensional object like a Polaroid or a print or the image you see on Instagram or on your website. There's nothing you can do that's going to take that 2D item and turn it into 3D. So stop wasting your time looking for these foreground elements, these midground elements, these background elements. If you see something you like, just throw it up and fire away and capture what you're looking for. Don't spend all this time trying to create this illusion of depth, because you're not going to be able to do it. It's nothing you can do is going to be able to make this print or this photograph on your computer 3-dimensional. So just save your time and just photograph anything that you see that happens to catch your eye. You know, I always see these people, I guess this is the third kind of quick tip. So people spend just thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on all these lenses, the holy trinity of lenses, if you will, wide angle lenses, mid-range zooms, telephotos, super telephotos. These lenses are crazy expensive too. And I apologize if you hear any road noise. I am in an absolutely epic location, which is about 25 yards off this main street. But all of these lenses, at the end of the day, there's really only one lens you need. It's the wide angle is king. I mean, if I could find a 1mm wide angle lens, I would get that. The wider, the better. It's why all these major camera manufacturers, your Sonys, your Nikons, your Canon, Fujis, Kodaks, those camera manufacturers are continually making better and better wide angle lenses, because that's what's most important, to capture as much as you possibly can. So don't worry about trying to zoom in and get this like super telephoto vignette of this tiny little scene right through here. If you see something you like, just throw on the widest lens you got and capture everything, because when you get home and post, you can zoom in and you can crop it however you want. If you want a 400mm shot, zoom all the way into 300% and you can pick the area of your frame you want to crop. Crop it, there's your super telephoto shot. You want a mid-range zoom? Zoom into 100%. Crop it that way. There's that shot too. So as long as you just capture everything with a wide angle lens, when you get home, then you can figure out all your different focal lengths. Save your money, save time, and just figure it all out in post when you get back home. Now this is one of those scenarios where you'd see the photographers bust out their $1,000 tripods, which this is the thing that I love the most, are these $1,000 tripods, sometimes $2,000 tripods, all to maybe reach over these bushes here, or the best thing yet is to keep your camera steady. So this is, what is this, the fourth quick tip. If you think about it, camera manufacturers, I named them off earlier, the big ones, the Nikons, the Canon, the Fujis, the Sonys, the Kodaks, they are spending millions, tens of millions of dollars on R&D research and development, on in-body image stabilization. It gets better and better every year. They found a way to put these camera sensors on gimbals, basically. So they're spending millions of dollars, the smartest people in the world, doing this. And the whole purpose is to keep your camera steady. But there's a whole industry out there dedicated to tripods, and people continue to spend all this money on these tripods, carrying these tripods around, all to keep your camera steady. Well, folks, IBIS, every modern camera pretty much has it. This Fuji GFX 100S, the IBIS is so good in this camera, if I don't drink any coffee in a particular day, I can almost hand hold, maybe I'm a little overzealous here, but probably about 15 seconds. About a 15-second exposure with zero coffee. Now, some people probably can do maybe a 20, maybe a 30-second long exposure. If you're gonna start doing like 5-minute long exposures, maybe then you need a tripod. But if you're not doing minute-long exposures, you can probably easily get away with the in-body image stabilization in your camera. So don't spend all this money and all this time fussing around with tripods. If your camera's got IBIS, use that. Maybe don't drink any coffee one particular morning, keep a nice steady hand and get that perfectly clean shot. Maybe sometimes there'll be a little bit of blur in it, but nobody's gonna notice it anyway, especially on Instagram or your website, so it's gonna be completely fine regardless. Now the fifth tip is something that I like to call one and done. And I like to look at photography as purely a numbers game. The more images you capture, the better chance are you're gonna get a keeper. And I see these photographers all the time. Some of them are my friends. I go on location, which is seldom the case, but they'll get on location, they'll get their $1,000 tripods out, they'll get all set up, and then they'll spend hours making these tiny little adjustments, a millimeter down, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. They'd spend so much time just making these tiny, tiny adjustments. And they just continue to take the same shot over and over and over and over and over again. But I say, when you get on location, if you see a scene you like right here, like I like these lily pads, I like the water, I like the tree line, I'm not gonna worry about this foreground or depth or anything like that, because you can't create 3D. I'm just gonna take this shot real quick, set up my settings here, one shot, and done. And I'm gonna move on to somewhere else. So I'm gonna completely work this entire scene, maybe come away with like 50 or maybe 100 images of this location. And I'll probably end up with maybe 25 or 30 keepers, as opposed to just sitting here, hammering away over and over and over at the same composition with all these tiny little adjustments with my little ball head or my tripod. So just one and done, keep it simple, and just move on. I found this area right here. It's kind of like this natural framing, the shadow box almost, where you can kind of shoot through and capture the lake, which looks pretty interesting. So I think I'm gonna kind of play around with this composition a little bit, see if I can make something interesting here. But before I do, I just wanna say a real quick thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Professional Photographers of America, or PPA for short. There's a ton of benefits of using PPA, which happens to be the largest nonprofit photography organization, but the main attraction for me was their straightforward approach to insuring camera gear. They offer $15,000 worth of gear insurance with a flat deductible rate of $350, along with a deductible rate of only $50 for repairs. And with a PPA membership, you'll also receive free registration to the largest and oldest photo conference in the world, Imaging USA 2022, with over 80 speakers from across the photographic community, along with exhibits, shows, and the Imaging USA Expo with all the new and hottest photography products. Plus, these events are always great opportunities to network with other fellow photographers as well. So check out the link in the description below and receive $25 off your PPA membership today, along with free access to the Imaging USA 2022. So I just found this beautiful red autumn tree. Most of the autumn leaves in this area are kind of turned brown or fallen, but this one seems to be hanging on. It's got a nice arching nature to it. And kind of sticking with the theme of saving time, this is I guess the fifth quick tip, and it's something that I call you're not smarter than the computer. And like I mentioned, saving time is critical. Being efficient when you're on location is the utmost importance. So don't sit there and try and figure out the optimal camera set. Don't sit here and play with your shutter speed and play with your aperture and play with your ISO or your white balance and things of that nature. There's a reason why these massive camera manufacturers, your Sonys, your Canons, your Fujis, your Kodaks, these huge camera manufacturers spend all this money, tens of millions of dollars, on the automatic features on your camera. So why not use it? These are the smartest people in the world creating the smartest mini supercomputers for our cameras. And no matter how smart you may think you are, you're not going to be smarter than the computer itself. So why not lean on the computer? Use those auto features. Let the camera figure out what that perfect exposure is. That way you don't have to spend all this time trying to figure out the exposure triangle, trying to figure out your shutter speed and your aperture and your ISO. Just find your subject, because as a photographer, we're not supercomputers. We're not. We're creatives. So be creative when you're on location. Find beautiful trees that arch into the water, these amazing compositions, and that's what you should focus on. And then point your camera at it and then press the button. Let the automatic features take care of the rest of it. You'll save so much time and you'll be able to move on and capture more of the area to better tell that story. So this is that area that I was talking about a few moments ago, where these kind of stumps are growing out of the water. There's some interesting lily pads. So there's definitely some interest here. I've already kind of worked this entire shoreline of this lake. I probably took maybe 87 or 97 different photos, different compositions. So I'm sure probably 35 or 40 of those are going to be keepers. But this brings me to my seventh quick tip, and it's something that I call eyes up. Oh, that's a loud car there. But eyes up. So every once in a while, sure, you do find a composition where you need to get a little bit lower, but I often see photographers that are like laying on the ground trying to get these different perspectives. But if you think about it, ever since the dawn of time, humans, we always have our eyes in one spot, and it's right on top of our head. Our eyes are always towards the highest part of our body. And that's the way we see the world. So that's what we're used to seeing. So if you start creating these photos with all these different perspectives, people aren't even going to know what they're looking at. It's going to be a very uncomfortable image to even view. So you want to create things that we're used to seeing. So the majority of your photographs really should be at eye level. Right up here, this is the way we see the world, and this is going to be the way that we find it most comfortable. Images that are shot at eye level are much more interesting. They're much more easy on the eyes, they're more comfortable to view, and it just makes it just for a much more engaging photograph, as opposed to these images where you're laying on the ground, maybe trying to capture a reflection. Just keep things simple and keep things the way that we're used to seeing the world, and you're going to have much greater success with your photography. So this brings me to my eighth and almost final suggestion. Actually, these are tips, not suggestions. I'm not really sure what the difference is, but tip feels a little bit more impactful, a little bit more powerful. But the eighth tip is something that I called landscape, not portrait. And it's kind of crazy that you even have to talk about this, but it has to do with the orientation that you have your camera in. There's a reason why these things are called the way they are. Landscape orientation, portrait orientation. So us as outdoor landscape photographers, we should always be shooting in a landscape orientation. If you want to shoot humans, if you want to do birthday parties or weddings, that's when you can start doing a portrait orientation, flip it vertical. But the majority of your landscape photography and outdoor photography shots should always be in a landscape orientation. That's why the naming convention is such. Landscape, portrait. I often see photographers trying to shake it up, trying to create variety, but all that does is create confusion, because when I see a photograph of a mountain or a tree or a waterfall in a portrait orientation, I immediately start looking for the human. Like, where's the person? Where's the person in the wedding dress? Or where's the birthday party? Because it's in a portrait orientation. But it needs to be in a landscape orientation, because we're shooting landscapes. Now for my 9th and final tip, and this is the last one for a reason. I definitely say this the best for last here. And it's something that I call flat earth. And this is definitely up for debate. But I often hear this big struggle with keeping horizons straight. And once again, the big camera manufacturers are implementing this in the cameras. I'm talking about the Sonys, the Canon, the Nikons, the Fujis, the Kodaks. They're putting all these, I don't even know what you call that little device, the leveler inside of the camera, with one purpose: to help you get those horizons straight. But we all know that the horizon is not straight. We don't live in a flat earth. And I know that's up for debate. There are some people out there that do believe we do. And I have never flown above the earth, but I'm pretty certain it is not flat. But I do know that the world is round. The earth is round, which means that that horizon is also sloped as well. So don't worry, don't sit there on location. Remember, speed is everything. Try and be as efficient when you're on location as you possibly can, but don't sit there and just move your camera back and forth to try and get it perfectly right, the horizon. It's okay if it's a little bit off. The horizon is sloped anyway. It's not perfectly flat regardless. So it's okay if it's a little bit. Nobody's gonna notice it on Instagram or on your website or anything like that if your horizon's just a little bit off. So don't sweat the small stuff when you're on location. Just capture what you like and just move on. And if your little device in your camera is showing it's a little bit off, just don't worry about it and just move on, capture images, and just focus on the number of shots. That's what matters. Not the quality, it's the quantity that counts. So I really do hope that you enjoyed this week's video, focused purely on the 9 best tips for creating horrible landscape photos. I do hope the next time that you are out on location that you will give some of these a try. I know some of them might seem a little bit unorthodox, but I promise you, if you just try it out, you will definitely realize that what you have been doing, like, why haven't you been doing these amazing tips since the beginning? And it'll probably change your photography. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse, but it will definitely change your photography. So I do want to thank you for watching this week's video. If you did enjoy it, if you could give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. Boy, that wind feels nice. And also check out the link in the description below for the $25 off your PPA membership, along with free registration to Imaging USA 2022. And a special thanks to my wife as well. I'm sure you probably already noticed that the camera is moving around. I've never actually shot a video where somebody was holding it for me, and she was definitely kind enough to do that for me today. So thanks, babe. I'm not even sure if this is in focus, but I really do appreciate it. So I hope you all have a wonderful day and did enjoy the video, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.